Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every day I try to answer some of the biggest questions in business and help you better serve your customers too, all by leveraging technology. And some of the big questions I want to answer today is how digital identity for identity verification is a great place to start when it comes to building an ecosystem of trust. And we're also going to explore how the different ways of digital identity can make everyday transactions safer and easier for consumers, all while improving people's online experiences with brands. And not only that, we're also going to explore why it's important to not only know your customer, but also know your business, especially if you're serious about navigating business challenges without compromising on security. And to make sense of this complex topic is Philipp Pointer from a company called Jumio. So buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Vienna in Austria, where Philipp is going to answer these questions and discuss the topic of identity and digital identity in much more detail. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Philipp Pointer. I'm Chief of Digital Identity at Jumio. I've been a leader in product management in the tech space for over a decade now. And thanks for having me on the show.
Now, you said you've been a leader in the tech space for over a decade now. I want to take you back in time before that decade. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that ignited a spark and put you on this path? Or ultimately, what's your origin story?
So, for me, technology, this goes all the way back into childhood. When I was reading stories and comics and whatnot, I wasn't so much fascinated by Mickey Mouse or Donald. For me, it was gyro gear loose, right? So It's always been these inventor types that were fascinating to me. And I wanted to be an inventor like them. And unfortunately, it turned out that I was born with two left hands, so I cannot create anything useful with my hands. And then later in life, I figured out that, product management and software is the way we solve problems and we innovate and we bring inventions into the world these days. And so I knew that is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Love that. What a great story. And of course, it was that path that would eventually lead you to Jumio. And in the past, we have had Robert Prigg and Bala Kumar from Jumio on the podcast. But for people that are listening to the podcast for the first time, maybe hearing about Jumio for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about the company and the problems that you solve for your customers with technology?
Sure. So for me, I was working at a company and I was in charge of a product where we had to do KYC on our customers. We had to do a solid identity proofing. And as many companies back in those days, this was solved with a group of in-house people sitting there all day long and examining the IDs that have been submitted via email or maybe uploaded or something. And so a former colleague and now dear friend had invited me to join Jumio. It was super early days for Jumio. I was employee number 10.
Wow.
It was really the beginning. But the premise was that Jumio would go and solve this identity problem at scale with faster turnaround times, more accuracy, and basically infinite scalability, so that people, if they wanted to onboard twice as much people, they wouldn't need twice the review team in-house. And so because I was working on this problem on this consumer-facing product, I knew how big of a challenge that is for companies, and I knew how big this opportunity for Jumio would be. And I joined, and that's exactly what we did in the years after. So I was chief product officer for the first 9 years, and at Jumio we really tried to have the government issued ID as the foundation of the identity, which is then complemented with a lot of these other services that you would expect today to get to a full KYC and risk and fraud platform. But that was the origin, and it was so clear to me that is a problem worth solving, and that's what we did.
Wow. And of course, we are entering Christmas holiday season at the moment. There'll be a lot of Christmas parties, etc. Please tell me you're going to have a T-shirt printed up with employee number 10 for when you get on the dance floor. You got to make that happen, right?
Yeah, maybe in some years' time. Yeah, but it's been a nice ride, really, to see something go from a company like this go from nothing to something. I mean, we joke about we were celebrating that we had 500 transactions in a day, or we verified 500 people in a single day, and now it's closer to 1 million every day.
Wow.
And so it's been fantastic.
And of course, here in 2022, you currently lead Jumio's digital identity strategy and the initiative to enable multiple digital identity providers all in one ecosystem. And it's such a hot topic at the moment. So can you tell me a little bit more about how digital identity for identity verification is a great place to start when it comes to building an ecosystem of trust? Because I think there's a lot of businesses that need to get to that place, but getting there is often complex and overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, and so maybe let's first start with kind of defining a little bit better what we mean with digital identity, because it's being used now more and more for all kinds of different things. So for us, when we say digital identity, we really mean a reusable identity that covers the spectrum from self-reported information that has been verified to a lower degree of assurance, but then also information that has been verified to a very high degree of assurance, so that it can be used for a full KYC and even bank account opening and everything online. And so right now we are entering this era where all of us as citizens, we're gonna get digital identities issued in the next 5 years, 10 years, your guess is as good as mine. Yeah. But we see these initiatives all around the world. And so what we carry with us today as a piece of plastic in our wallets is going to move into our smartphones and be hosted there. And the advantages are going to be big for the consumer side. It's going to be big advantages for the businesses. It's going to be more secure. And that's going to be the way how we exchange information, business to business, business to consumer, consumer to consumer, consumer to government. All of these relationships are going to be governed by our digital identities in the future.
Incredibly cool. And just to further simplify and maybe bring to life what we're talking about here, do you have any examples of different ways digital identity can ultimately make those everyday transactions both safer and easier for consumers?
Yeah, so a very simple example of safety for the consumer is today, often when you open an online bank account, you sign up for a car sharing service, you send your copy of your passport in advance to an hotel, you're sending an actual picture of that document. And then this picture lives somewhere in these companies' databases for, who knows how long. And then eventually there's going to be a data breach. And then that picture of your passport is now in the hands of the fraudsters. And they're going to sell it online. And so it spreads, it goes to multiple different bidders. And so now, everybody on the dark web has a copy of your passport, and they're going to use it. They're going to use it for identity theft purposes. They're going to register bank accounts, open credit cards, and use your identity, because what did you do as a consumer? You handed over the source. You handed over the thing it needs to prove your identity, right? Whereas in the world of digital identity, the cryptographic proof actually stays with you. And so you might be sending your first name, last name, date of birth. That might still be sitting somewhere in a database. Ideally, kind of when we reach the final best state of digital identity, maybe that's not necessary anymore. But in the beginning, you're going to transmit these data points. They're going to sit somewhere, but it's impossible to recreate the proof just with the data, right? And so that is a huge advantage for the consumer. You'll also have way more transparency over which data points you share. We have a huge problem of oversharing. If you just want to verify someone's age and you use a picture of your driver's license, there's so much more information that has nothing to do with your age And so that creates additional risk. And digital identity with the selective sharing and the cryptographic proof and the ability to see, who did I share my data with, and the ability to revoke access to your data and newly updated data. That's all gonna have so many benefits on the safety side. And for ease of use, I mean, just imagine you had your, fully KYC data, verified shipping addresses, multiple of them, your phone numbers, your email addresses, and then even simple things like your favorite picture, your favorite avatar picture that you want to use when you open an online forum account or something. All of these things can sit conveniently in your digital identity. And then as you go through the internet and also as you go through the real world, you're going to have these requests to share some of these data points in ever-changing combinations, whatever is required for the situation. And all you have to do as a consumer is with one show of your face or one tap of your finger, depending on what biometric you use, you can share all of that information in a secure and transparent way. And so I think it's really going to change the way that we use these data types. It's going to be everywhere, because right now, very often doing an identity check is cost prohibitive. So many places would like to know the identities of their consumers, but it's just not affordable to them because of the business model. And in the future, it's just going to be everywhere.
And I would urge everyone listening to, I think if you Google world's biggest data breaches, and if you go to, I think it's Information is Beautiful, there's this huge information graphic there of all the biggest companies in the world that have been breached over time and how many people have impacted. And you look at that list and it's just about everywhere that you've logged in at some point. And you also mentioned booking a hotel room there. And I'm glad you raised that, because this is something that's bugged me for a long time, because you provide your details when you book the hotel room, and then you arrive and have to line up and hand over those same details again before you can get to your room. There's so much room for improvement there, isn't there?
Yeah, I can't count the number of times I've written down my address for a car rental agency, and it's just not necessary, right? Yeah. And especially now, as Trevor, it becomes more complicated because you need to bring all these printed forms and maybe, vaccination passes and all kinds of things. It's just so much better if this is kind of stored in one place. You have control over it as the consumer. You have transparency over what is being shared, and you do it with just the convenience of a tap of your finger or show of your face.
And obviously, we've covered everything from the consumer angle, but for business leaders or decision makers listening, do you have any examples of how it can also improve people's online experience with brands? Because that is often the big game changer between different brands, isn't it? Who provides the best experience is what keeps customers coming back for more.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be a period, a window where accepting and working with these digital identities as an early adopter company is going to give you some differentiation. I don't know how long that's going to last, because I think everybody is going to want to get in once we see a lot of consumer adoption and lots of people carrying these digital identities. But overall, the promise of digital identity for businesses is a lot higher conversion rate. So people are going to go through your onboarding process in a much easier, more convenient fashion. So you have less drop off, and that's real business. That's money. And then on the other hand, more fraud security. So it's going to be harder for the fraudsters to get in. We're going to see probably, for the next 10 years or more, we're going to see this hybrid world where some people have digital credentials and others have physical credentials. So companies will always want to accept both for a time. But it also means that the fraud is going to concentrate on the physical documents. And so you get this almost, clean population of customers that used a appropriate and high level assurance digital identity. And you can save a lot of operational cost on reviewing these account openings. You can drop some of the security measures that are costly. And so I think there's going to be a lot of promise and advantages for businesses too.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Nextiva. Gone are the days of jumping from app to app, killing precious time that you could be using to get real business done. Alternatively, with Nextiva One, you can communicate and collaborate with your customers and teams from one single place. Threaded conversations that let you see an entire call and messaging history regardless of communication channels. Seeing the whole conversation in one place actually gives you the whole story of the customer and allows you to provide premium personalised services while connecting with your team. Get your Nextiva One customer and team conversation system set up and running today by simply visiting nextiva.com/techtalkdaily. And before you came on the podcast today, I did a little bit of research on you, and I was reading that you believe that it's important to not just know your customer, but also know your business if you're serious about navigating business challenges without compromising on security. Can you expand on that?
So ideally, and this is going to take a while longer, but ideally, digital identity is a two-way street. Yeah. If you think about it today, you as the consumer, when you sign up for an online service, there is this, of course you have, things like browser certificates and some hints of who the identity of that company is, but you don't really verify them on an entity level the same way that they verify you. And digital identity makes that possible. You can construct the exchange such that you as the consumer get to learn who you are sharing the data with, and that company in itself has a digital identity, and so they can prove who they are. And that's really a game changer for the consumers as well, and for the whole kind of trust fabric that is going to be used there in those interactions. So that's one aspect of it. The other one is, so for example, Canada, who's at the very kind of forefront of implementing digital identity, they put the entire business registry online and based on digital identities. And so all of the processes around incorporating an entity, exchanging information between entities, interacting with the government as an entity, all of that is now based on that digital identity for businesses. And that has created a lot of advantages, removed a lot of paperwork. So it's really efficient, it's secure, and it just drives interactions in places where previously people would go, this is just too cumbersome, I'm not going to do it. And then, there's this entire industry that deals with identifying companies for reasons of vendor due diligence, partnership due diligence, customer due diligence, underwriting of merchants in the payment industry. And you have to understand these entities. You have to understand who the ultimate beneficial owners are. Well, guess what? Digital identity is going to solve all of that in a very slick and easy and straightforward manner.
And of course, we're at that time of the year where everyone's looking at what tech trends will dominate the year ahead. And as someone that's working right in the heart of this identity space, is there any trends that particularly excite you or just caught your eye at the moment?
Well, I mean, very generally speaking, I think this whole topic of machine learning and AI is going to dominate the next decades. This is such a fantastic technology, and really only we're seeing the beginnings of this. So the applications that we see today in machine learning and AI, this is just the start. And so if you're in a job that doesn't require direct human interaction, empathy, or creativity, machine learning and AI is gonna kind of take that job over the next years. And so it's also a responsibility to make sure that productivity increase, also kind of the wealth distribution is being done well in society. But from a technology point of view, this is just incredible what is possible with these technologies.
And we started the podcast today talking about your origin story and what put you on this path. But as we come full circle now, what are the biggest lessons that you say you've learned from your career in tech? Is there anything you'd pass on down to somebody much younger or somebody entering the industry for the first time?
That's a big question. So, I mean, in product management, I think one of the most, so if I look at, Jumio has been in this niche of visual inspection of government issued IDs. Jumio has been the leader for the last decade. And so I often ask myself, like, what did we do right? And why is that? And I think one of the biggest components there is that we are not obsessed with competition. We are obsessed with the value that we can bring to our customers and solving our customers' problems. So, of course, we have an eye on what our competition does. We have competitive analysis. But the moment that you freak out, if your competitor does something great, and you drop everything and you try to copy what they did, that makes you a follower. That guarantees that you're gonna be second, third, or fourth in the race. And so, if we use this analogy of a Formula One race, right? If you're in the leading position, you have to find the optimal lane to drive in. And for competition to overtake, it means that they need to go out of that line. And so they need to kind of try to get around you left or right. And so if you did what they did, that also takes you out of this optimal path. And so not being obsessed with competition, but being obsessed with your own path towards value to the customer, I think is one of the most important lessons.
And if you thought that was a big question, wait till I've got the answer to the final question here. And that is there a book that has inspired you that you'd add to our Amazon wish list, or a song that means something to you or helps you get your head in the zone that we can add to our Spotify playlist? This is always the biggest question of them all. So what are you going to leave us with today?
So just 2-3 weeks ago, I reread a book from 2018, which is called Factfulness. Yeah. It's written by Hans Rosling, Swedish professor and humanitarian scientist. And it describes the 10 ways and biases in which we constantly think the world is worse than it actually is. And so if I need an injection of positivity, I go back to this book. Because, in the news, you hear about, war and crisis and problems, but nobody talks about the really great achievements of the last decades of, hundreds of millions of people moving out of extreme poverty and having to live off less than a dollar a day, to the advancements in public health in many, many regions of the world. Coming back to tech, the breakthroughs we have in fusion technology to solve the energy crisis of the future. And so it's a nice reminder that the world actually is also creating a lot of positive things and a lot of advancements. And I highly recommend reading this book. Factfulness by Hans Rosling, and unfortunately he has passed in 2017, but his kids are actually continuing his legacy.
Well, I'll get that added straight to the Amazon wish list. I think everybody listening, including myself, could all use that injection of positivity right now. And for anyone listening that just wants to find out more information about Jumio, the kind of things we've talked about today, or even contact your team, what's the best starting point for everything?
Jumio.com is the best way to reach us and find out. And if you're interested in digital identity specifically, there are fantastic podcasts also that you can hear that are kind of dedicated to that topic. You'll digital identity, if you just search for it, there's so much content nowadays. It's really, we're at the peak of the hype.
Well, I'll add that link to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. Love chatting with you today about the different ways digital identity can make everyday transactions safer and easier for consumers, but while also improving people's online experience with brands. But even more so, all washed down with your inspiring origin story, and you even left us with an injection of positivity with that book. So thanks for joining me today.
Great pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
I think digital identity, especially for identity verification, is an incredibly complex, overwhelming and often daunting topic for businesses, but it's also a great place to start when it comes to building an ecosystem of trust. But I'm curious, how are you dealing with these issues and navigating these complex topics in your business? As always, email me directly at techblogwriter@outlook.com. You also get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes. Let's keep this conversation going. Share with me anything that you think we missed from today's conversation or anything from your experiences. But that's it for today's episode. However, I am going to return again bright and early tomorrow with a completely different topic where we'll try and answer some of those big questions in tech and business and everything in between. So hopefully you'll join me again, but a big thank you for listening today. And until next time, don't be a stranger.